Crack in the Mountains unleashed a Fairy Troublemaker. But don't worry, because Sisu and the Master Gardener are going to help us hunt a Little Mermaid. I'm Van Connor.
And I'm Adam Ball, and this is Off Screen, your 7-day guide to everything movies.
Boom.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Loads of new movies to talk about this week that Van Connor has already seen and I haven't. But there is an exception this week. The last movie we're going to be talking about, I have seen. I'm not going to say anything about that yet. We're going to start with Master Gardener. We were having a little chat about this earlier. You know, as far as the synopsis goes, this looks really good. It's got Sigourney Weaver in and it sounds fun.
Well, I mean, it sounds fun. It's worth noting, first and foremost, this is a movie written and directed by Paul Schrader. And I'm not sure if I said this to you last week. Be it good or bad, it's never an uninteresting week when there is a new Paul Schrader movie.
Yeah.
Paul Schrader generally is a writer rather than a director. He has had some forays into directing, and they've not generally been great, if we're being honest. I'll get to that in a moment. This is part of a step up for him. His last few have actually been a bit of a marked improvement. This stars in the lead Joel Edgerton. He stars opposite Sigourney Weaver and Quintessa Swindell. Sigourney Weaver we're all familiar with. Quintessa Swindell most recently was seen in Black Adam, I believe. She was one of the Justice Society heroes in Black Adam. Here I've got to look up the name because it's a brilliant name. Joel Edgerton plays Narvel Roth. A brilliant Marvel with an N. Narvel Roth, who is a horticulturalist who he works for, I'm trying to remember what the term is, for a widower who has inherited a plot of land. And that's who Sigourney Weaver plays. She's the sort of rich widow who owns a stately sort of manor on which Narvel Roth is the horticulturalist / gardener. Sigourney Weaver's landowner takes him aside one day and says, I have a great niece who's a bit troublesome. She's coming to live with me. I'm going to take her under my wing. I'm going to have her live here. She's going to live in the shed out back. I want you to train her in the horticultural arts. Take her under your wing and teach her this. This should get her on the straight and narrow. However, it turns out that good old Narvel has something of a bit of a checkered past. And the arrival of Sigourney's grandniece or great niece, starts to bring the dark secrets of this past right to the surface as he starts to become more and more protective of his new young charge. Because it turns out she has a boyfriend from the projects who's something of a dealer, something of a troublemaker, and he sets out to protect her. I've got a clip for you, and this is Narvel threatening said troublemaking boyfriend.
You must be Farmer John.
I'm a gardener. That's why I wear these funny clothes. Yeah, carry these pruning shears. It's part of my job. You know, pruning shears, they can snap off a branch or a plant bulb, just like that. Same time it takes to snap off a finger or some testicles. Hey, sissy, think twice before you move. Done a lot of pruning in my life. RG, you got a visit from the police. I'm a second warning.
Yeah, see, I watched the trailer to this, and there's, how can I put it, a lot more action in there than you would expect from the synopsis, from what I saw.
Now, that's the thing. I mean, the trailer and that clip and just the general marketing for this, I think, sell a dark... well, not a darker, actually, because it is quite a dark drama. I think they sell a more suspenseful film than what you're getting. This is a lot more nuanced. And if you look at Schrader's recent body of work, for instance, it does kind of fit with the times. Schrader, I'm not sure, did he direct First Reformed? I'm trying to remember here. He wrote The Card Counter. He wrote First Reformed. I'm trying to remember here. Hang on, I'm just literally pulling this up. Writer. He directed The Card Counter recently and First Reformed, of course. But before that, Dog Eat Dog with Willem Dafoe and Nicolas Cage, which was a really acquired taste. Now, the last two, obviously, The Card Counter and First Reformed, were closer to this. This does seem to be something of a renaissance for Paul Schrader. But however, whilst all the other critics were going along this week being like, oh, Paul Schrader, the director of First Reformed, I couldn't help but be yes, but he was also the director of The Canyons, the best forgotten 2013 erotic drama starring Lindsay Lohan and ex-porn star James Dean, which is one of the worst movies of the 2010s. He also directed was it Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist, one of the most troubled movies of the 2000s, a movie they had to literally make twice. There's two different versions of it in existence under two different titles. He is, I say, better off as a writer, and that goes back to the 70s, because this guy was a writer for Scorsese. He wrote Taxi Driver. Movies like that. He wrote really iconic movies. As a director, though, his efforts have been somewhat lackluster until the most recent two, until First Reformed and The Card Counter. And this is very much in the same vein as those movies. It is very much, I think there's an interview with him this past week in which he talks about how he would direct Joel Edgerton as an actor, and how he said, you need to imagine that you are the rocks on the shore. You as the actor you are the rocks on the shore, and the story and the dialogue and the events are the waves that crash against you. And that is actually an incredible way of looking at it. Yeah, and you can kind of see that philosophy and that ideology running through this. It's, as I say, a very, very nuanced film about the ticks, about just the little quirks of the character. It's not a movie about dialogue. It's not, and even though, for instance, it has a sex scene in that is not in any way erotic, but is quite powerful. It's a very powerful sequence, but has no titillation or eroticism to it, despite the fact that there's quite ample nudity, for instance. And that is, you can make the argument that having directed The Canyons with Lindsay Lohan and ex-porn star James Dean, that he's probably well-versed in having done that by now, which, oh my God, you've got to see that movie. It's an absolute travesty. And Lindsay Lohan was really, really going for it in that one. Contessa Swindell, I think, shows a very different side of herself here. I know that Joel Edgerton is great across the board. Like, even in truly terrible movies, Joel Edgerton is always great. However, my MVP on this one, and I've got to give it, and again, you expect this of her, it's Sigourney, who just shows up to play here in full Joan Crawford mode. This is full old school Joan Crawford right here, like proper, I've sunk 4 mint julepers before I showed up to set. I'm ready to have some fun. And she's really going for it. She just wants to smash glasses against the scenery and slap some people. She's really going for it. Just this simmering rage that is just permanently under the surface. But at the same time, it's Sigourney. So she doesn't really let on with it. You know what I mean? It's a really great balanced performance, and it is all about the subtextual. That direction about being the rocks and having everything crash, be the wave that crashes against you, absolutely works here. And you could say you can see it with Edgerton, but you can most definitely and most certainly see it with Sigourney Weaver. The movie is worth seeing purely for Sigourney Weaver more than anything else. But it's great outside of that. I will also say a couple of other interesting cast members in there. Isai Morales, who incidentally is going to be the villain of the upcoming, I think, 7th Mission Impossible movie.
Okay.
Best known as the Elder Adama in Caprica, if you're a sci-fi TV fan. And also Rick Cosnett from The Flash, Eddie Thorne from The Flash, which ended this week. The TV series of The Flash ended this week after 9 years, and he played Eddie Thorne, and did ancestor of the Reverse Flash, if you know that mythology. But always an interesting performer, a bit of a pretty boy who actually has some real depth to him, some surprising depth under the Melrose Place level of good looks that he's rocking at any given time. This, I say, is definitely in keeping with The Card Counter and First Reformed. If you're a fan of those two, you'd be a fool to miss this. If you're still on the fence about Schrader based on his inarguably crappier past body of work, I would say definitely give this a look, and I think this could turn you around. But it is quite a stirring, suspenseful drama. In terms of what the mystery of Narvel's past really is, it's not much of a revelation. It's not. They don't really manage to keep it under the hat that well. It's not really that kind of a movie. But great performances. I think the script is quite tight. I think the direction is really inventive, and I think it has a way of capturing its environment, a way of balancing the glamour of the gardens and things like that with effectively the projects, with the slummier elements of the small American town, for instance, that I think works gangbusters. I say it's called Master Gardener. It's in cinemas on general release, pretty wide release actually, from today. And I say, never a dull week when there's a new Paul Schrader movie.
Well, there you go. You can go and make your own mind up if you want to go watch it in the cinema, which, as Van says, out from today. Right, we're moving on. We've got two to talk about in the next block. We are going to talk about the Fairy Troublemaker and A Crack in the Mountain. We'll see what Van thought of those two in just a second. Hello and welcome back to the show. Okay, two more movies to chat about with Van Connor, which are both out in cinemas from today. The Fairy Troublemaker in a second. Let's start with A Crack in the Mountain. So this is not just another Wonder of the World kind of documentary, is it?
Actually, it is and it isn't. So it's about a natural wonder of the world, the Hang Sang Dong Caves in Vietnam, which, if you're not aware of them, are this natural formation. Obviously, cave. You're aware of caving as a hobby, I presume, right? My best friend's dad was really into caving. Doesn't for health reasons can't do it anymore.
If I wasn't shaped like a wedge, I would get into caving. It really turns
Well, funnily enough, Han Sang Dong's got you covered. It's got you. Because you could walk into this cave. You can literally walk into this cave because the entrances to it are 450 feet across and 600 feet high. The actual passage through these caves is larger than most cathedrals, as we are told. And the local governments only allow a certain number of tourists per year. I think it's something like 1,000 tourists a year or something like that they actually allow it. So you have to apply. And with the increased popularity of this cave, this has had a knock-on effect with the local region. There has been an obvious increase and influx in tourists. This has had a knock-on effect with the local economy. It has boosted local businesses. It has brought in outside funding and outside businesses and things like that. And it has forced them to look at what they will and won't allow to actually be added to their general way of life in the local area. So they look at comparable local sort of, tourist traps and how they've had to install cable cars above national forests and things like that. And they had to ask, how far are they willing to go to accommodate this natural advancement of the tourism trade before they start to lose their own way of life? And what effect will this have on, for instance, their environment? You look at, for instance, the amount of local waste that will, the increase in local waste that will be produced and things like that. But at the same time, how does that compare with how much better off economically they will be in the local area and things like that? It is actually really fascinating. I started watching this literally today. And within the first 2 minutes, I thought, oh, good Lord, I'm going to be in for a long afternoon, aren't I? But very, very quickly, once they get to the crux of that argument and you start to look at that delicate equilibrium and, again, balance, and you start to look at the butterfly effect of it all, you start to really find what's compelling about this. I was genuinely fascinated by this. And, of course, absolutely breathtaking scenery, because this is an area that it's not untouched by man, obviously. It's like 1,000 tourists a year, for instance. But this is still something that is relatively unspoiled, and seeing it captured in the way that it is, absolutely stunning. And I actually spoke to a Vietnamese friend of mine earlier today. I actually sent her a poster for in the trailer and the description, and said, I saw this. You've got to see this documentary. You're fascinated. She said, I have heard of this, and I have seen footage of it. I've always been intrigued. I think I'll check this out. So I'm going to be really interested to see what she comes back with on that. But I had recently been looking. I don't know if you know this, there is a train journey you can get from Portugal to Vietnam.
No.
It's a 10,000 mile train journey you can get. It takes about 2 weeks. And it's kind of my dream holiday would be taking this train journey. You go all the way through Europe and you go through Moscow.
As long as you had Wi-Fi.
Well, you don't for certain chunks of it. I know. I wonder, could I get press screenings? But no, this is genuinely fast. It's written and directed by Alistair Evans, and they do talk to a lot of Western tourists, for instance, who have made the trip. And they ask, for instance, like when you've talked about these caves, like how many people do you know who've heard of them? And they say, 95% of people I have talked to about this do not know it exists. And the 5% that do will tell you this is absolutely breathtaking. I'm jealous as hell. You've got to go. And you can absolutely see why. But it is in that discussion. It is that argument about as I say, the equilibrium, that you'll be absolutely taken away.
It's got
by.
murmurs of like the beach in there somewhere, with it being this unspoiled, idealistic kind of. But at the same time, for what you've said, I feel like they're on a knife edge. Do they go full Vegas, or do they go, Land's End? And they're kind of in the middle at the moment, making a decision on what do we do with this, this area.
That's it. And in the middle of it all, you've got this. This is the largest cave in the world. I think it's 4.5 miles straight through this cave.
Wow.
About 4.5 miles across. And I would be genuinely fascinated to go myself now. It's like I didn't know this place existed yesterday, and now it's just. Expect a movie to be set here in the next 2 years. Like Folding Money now says a Hollywood movie will be the next Mission Impossible will go.
I was going to say
9.
It's going to be the next Jurassic Park, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that would be a more inventive sequel than the last few we've had. But just seeing the difference that the increase in tourism has made to just this small, impoverished Vietnamese community.
Yeah,
I'd say just absolutely compelling. If you check this out, especially if you are an environmentalist. Absolutely worth watching. In fact, I've just realised there's another friend of mine I really need to recommend this to, who's going to be absolutely taken away by it. So, for the environmentalist in your life, this is unmissable stuff. But if you're a student of the care of planet Earth, you owe it to yourself to check this out. It's called Crack in the Mountain. It's on limited release, I think, and on digital from today.
Right, let's move on to the Fairy Troublemaker. Is it just another Toy Story, Van?
Well, funnily enough, right. So this is a sort of a cheapy animated film. I'm thinking it might be French or Spanish. It is a European-made animated film in that style of, like the cheapy animated ones that we get. The ones that I usually describe as sub DreamWorks.
Yeah.
Like not up to, definitely not, because on the animation scale, you've got DreamWorks and Pixar. You've got Pixar at the top, you've got DreamWorks down below, and then DreamWorks and Illumination, and then you've got your sort of European ones, and you get your gems occasionally, like Fly Me to the Moon, things like Epic Tales, I would argue, is an above average one. This would rank below that, I would say. But weirdly, the film it's closest to in plot would probably be Dwayne Johnson's The Tooth Fairy from 2009, if you remember. You remember when Dwayne Johnson was still trying to figure out how to be a movie star, and he made a load of family movies with white posters where he was doing leaning?
Yeah.
That thing where he did leaning, the leaning posters on a white
The Men in Black lean.
Yeah, he did a load of those, and one of them was the Tooth Fairy, was the hockey player who became a Tooth Fairy. This is nowhere near as witty or as inventive as the Tooth Fairy, it's worth noting. And it follows a Tooth Fairy named, I think she's named Violetta, who becomes trapped in the human world by accident. And in order to find her way back, has to team up with a 12-year-old girl who, obviously lost all her own teeth at this stage, has outgrown the Tooth Fairy myth, and has to aid our Tooth Fairy to she has to actually get a hold of a tooth in order to go back. And they have to literally, get it from the younger brother. They have to get the tooth out of the younger brother to get back. It's the kind of film that skews very young. So Albert, for instance, your son, could watch this very comfortably, and you wouldn't necessarily be dead set against it. You wouldn't hate it or anything like that, but you probably have a nap, if I'm honest. It's about the level of, when you've got a kid's iPad game and they have the animated cutscenes.
Oh yeah,
standard. About that level, I would say.
Yeah.
It's like I say, it's not up to DreamWorks or Illumination level, and I'm being quite disparaging about Illumination, considering they just put out, the Mario Brothers movie, and that is one of the highest grossing movies of this year so far. So I probably need to rank Illumination a bit higher, because that movie did look good. Like, you've got to give that to Mario. It looks good. This did not quite work for me. I mean, there's a sequence that had me in absolute hysterics, in which the Tooth Fairy is literally trying to rip a tooth out of a child's mouth as they're asleep. You're like, no, those teeth are fixed, honey. I'd leave them there. But she's still really going for you. Like, this is absolutely just morbid as hell. I love it. That moment kind of made me chuckle. Also, I'm not sure. I have to look up the country of origin on this, because they seem to have a very weird tradition about what it is that Tooth Fairies do. Right, Luxembourg, German and Luxembourgian. It's Tooth Fairies, in whatever culture this originally descends from, seem to replace teeth with toys rather than money. Like, Yeah, I'm aware that, we and the Americans, I can tell you firsthand, all rely on, we trade teeth for money. That's how we do this. But no, apparently it's toys. They literally make toys like they're Will Ferrell and Elf.
Money is much easier to slide under a pillow when they're asleep, for a start.
Yeah, it definitely is. So that's called My Fairy Troublemaker. It is a PG. It is 85 minutes, so it's kind of about the right length. I mean, about 80 minutes with credits. Kind of movie you would whack on if you wanted to distract Albert for an hour and 20 minutes and have a bit of a kip on the couch.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those. I don't think personally that you'd sink money into taking him to the pictures to see this. Like, definitely not one of those.
No. I mean, he's 4, so I'm not even sure his attention would be held for more than half an hour, if I'm quite honest with you. But
it's bright and colourful,
I'd give it a go, and you can give it a go because if you want to watch it, it is in cinemas from today. Right. We've got 2 movies left to talk about. Sisu, which we will end with, which myself and Van have watched. I managed to get a screening on this, thanks to Van. But next, The Little Mermaid. We will see what Van
which I got a screening on thanks to you. So
yeah, that's true, actually. yeah, that's a good point. Well, we'll see what Van thought about it in just a minute. Stay there. Hello and welcome back to the show. 2 movies left to talk about that are out this week. Sisu in a moment. Right now, Van Connor has seen The Little Mermaid. What was she like?
I have gone under the sea for you, sir, and seen The Little Mermaid, and I found her wanting, if I'm honest. But we'll get to that. Okay, so live-action adaptation, latest in the increasingly long line of Disney live-action adaptations that my 4-year-old nephew thinks are the greatest thing ever. Makes complete sense because when he was about 6 months old, we took him to his very first multimedia premiere, and it was Dumbo. It was Tim Burton's Dumbo a few years ago. So this is literally baked into him from 6 months old. He now watches all of these movies over and over, and I imagine he'll add this to the repertoire because, in short, however you feel about Beauty and the Beast is how you're going to feel about this film, and he loves the Beauty and the Beast. So this one comes to us from director Rob Marshall, who directed Chicago, I think it was the 4th of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies on Stranger Tides, and directed Into the Woods for Disney as well. And the basic premise, if you've been living under a rock for 30-odd years, and 34 years, I think it is, since the original animated iteration. If you've been living under a rock for 30 years, the plot of The Little Mermaid goes as follows. Ariel, the wayward daughter of the Ocean King Trident, really has a fascination with the human world. She has been arbitrarily banned from, the surface world by Daddy, and one day, breaks the rules, comes across Prince Eric of the surface world, falls in love with him, and as a result makes a deal with the sea witch Ursula, whose backstory was ambiguous in the animated version, but is less so here, and I will get to that, in order to basically trade her mermaid status for human legs. In exchange for her voice. She has to give up her voice, effectively. So she goes into the human world with legs, but without the ability to speak or sing. And the only way she gets to stay there and get her voice back is if she gets true love's first kiss out of our dear prince within 3 days. And the only aid she has in this quest is via her sea creature friends, Sebastian the crab, Scuttlebutt the seagull, and Flounder the fish, in order to do this. But of course, Ursula and her, I think they're eels, so Ursula and her eel sidekicks, Flotsam and Jetsam, who are literally not even named in this version, are determined to throw a monkey in the works because they not only want Ariel to fail, they have designs on King Triton's, what do they call it? His trident and status as ruler of the oceans. I've got a clip for you. This is Sebastian the Crab, voiced by David Diggs in this iteration, noticeably from Hamilton. We will get to that. And Scuttlebutt the Seagull, voiced by Awkwafina.
Ah! Get off me, you fool!
Oh, hey! Didn't expect to find you here. And I really didn't expect to find her here.
Hey, you listen to me, bird. The king can never hear of this. We are going to forget this ever happened.
Ow!
Are you listening to me?
Yes,
You won't tell him, I won't tell him, and I will stay in one piece. You got it?
got it. Sorry, what'd you say again?
I'm a dead crab.
This is, from what you've said, this is basically a love child but of Cinderella and Splash.
Effectively, yeah. Now, it's worth noting the original Little Mermaid from 1989. I keep saying the original. Obviously, the original Disney iteration of the Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
There's always been versions of the Little Mermaid. And of course, it's based on a 16th century book by Hans Christian Andersen, maybe 17th century. I'm not actually sure when he wrote the Little Mermaid. That book, it's been around for centuries, literally. So there's been many, many versions of The Little Mermaid. This is obviously remaking the Disney version. That Disney version in 1989 was like 80-something minutes long, about 85 minutes long, we'll say, for argument's sake. This is 2.25 hours. So there is a lot of extra time here. Now, most of that time has been dedicated to fleshing out and rounding out the character of Prince Eric, who noticeably in the animated version wasn't a character at all, in much the same way that Prince Charming wasn't in Cinderella. Now, Ken Branagh's Cinderella, which was 2015, 2016 thereabouts, the Ken Branagh version, did a pretty good job of fleshing out Prince Charming as played in that iteration by Richard Madden from Game of Thrones. Here, you've got the same kind of thing being attempted. Now, he's played here by Jonah Hauer-King, not an actor I'm overly familiar with, but not a bad actor at all. He does a fairly good job. And the depth of writing that they afford him, I will say, does succeed in making Eric a character. However, everything else that they have crammed into this extra runtime, every extra bit of story that they have tried to put in there, feels very, it's an attempt to be progressive. Now, I want to be very clear off the bat that when I'm making these complaints, I am in no way whatsoever talking in any way about the ethnicity of the actress playing Ariel. Because Halle Bailey, who plays Ariel, who is an African-American actress, is the best thing about this movie. Hands down. Absolutely the best thing about this movie. Everything else they've done to try and make it a bit more inclusive, diverse, and a bit more with the times, feels patronizing to the point of just whacking people about the head with a sledgehammer. And I am including in that the shifting of location from what was clearly meant to be Europe in the animated version, like it was clearly meant to be like Denmark that they were in, to the Caribbean in this one. And there's a lot of that. And this goes up to and including a new element. Like I say, they've expanded the character of Prince Eric. He's now an adopted prince by a black queen, which is not something that was in the original. Now, things I really love about this. Halle Bailey, number one with a bullet. She's brilliant. Her cover of Part of Your World, genuinely tear-jerking. I was just tears streaming. She broke me. What a performance. Absolutely beautiful. Genuinely. However, beyond that, and Melissa McCarthy's Poor Unfortunate Souls, I thought that worked as well. That works quite as well. Ursula, as played by Melissa McCarthy, fine, but a bit lazy. A little bit. I would have gone a bit more inventive with it. For one thing, I would have hired an actual drag queen. Like I would have, if I were Disney, I would have sacked up a bit and actually gone and got, because the original. I don't know if you know this, but the original animated Ursula was based on Divine. Was based on the drag artist Divine.
Ah, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, staple of many a John Waters movie. Incidentally, Ariel in the 1989 version was based on 1989 Alyssa Milano. Very famously, who, otherwise known, to this day as literally the perfect human. Anyway, right, there's also a gag in 30 Rock in which John Hamm claims to have been the basis of Prince Eric, which actually would make a great degree of sense. After the good points, though, there's a lot of bad, and I do mean a lot of bad. The sea creature, the sidekick friends, Sebastian and Flounder in particular, attempting to make them realistic, photorealistic, leads you into a problematic area we had with Beauty and the Beast, where they simply start to become ugly. They become quite visually repellent. In this case, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2014 live action repellent. Like that level of hideous. That level of absolutely ugh. Like, I'll be honest, if they came up to me in a dark alley, I'd run. Like, I mean, Flounder, I don't know why, and the amount of money they had to have spent on animating Flounder when, do you know those fish that you see mounted on walls with a button and you press it and the fish sings?
Yes.
Like, I feel like you could have just ripped one of those off the wall and it would have looked better. Like, really, it would have actually looked better than... I mean, first of all, Flounder is a non-character here because there's no expansion to that writing. Same with Triton, actually. And as a result, Javier Bardem just seems bored. Like, he's visibly phoning it in. He's showing up dressed as Daddy Aquaman. Just phoning it in. Just, oh, Ariel, I love you. You are my daughter. You know, all the way through. He's like, dude, if you can't be bothered with this, how the hell are we supposed to be? Now... regarding that soundtrack, yeah, some of these covers are awful. And when I say awful, I mean as bad as some of the ones in The Lion King. Do you remember how awful some of the covers were in the live-action Lion King one?
Yes.
Yeah, like,
which ones did they do in here, then, that were bad?
I mean, in particular, Under the Sea, I think was in particular really, really...
They ruined Under the Sea?
They ruined Under the Sea. Can you believe ruining Under the Sea?
Sacrilege.
Kiss the Girl as well.
Oh,
wow,
no.
Right, and then we get to the cherry on top, because all of this has been arranged by Lin-Manuel Miranda, currently the go-to artist in resident for all of this over at Disney, because he seems to be the guy that's on speed dial over there, and he's added 2 new songs to this, one of which he's done in the only tone he seems to know, which is, let's just do a Hamilton bit. So he gets Sebastian and Scuttlebutt to do a new number in that rapping style of Hamilton. And you're just like, no, dude, come on. Take a day off. They're paying you money. Make effort. Come on.
That's a bit lazy.
And then you get to the visuals of it. And, right, so the water stuff. Everything underwater. Now, first of all, obviously, doing this 6 months after Avatar, The Way of Water, you're fighting an uphill battle anyway, because the underwater stuff has peaked now. Like, James Cameron peaked this. You know, James Cameron, a director so damn good that I literally wear his name around my neck. Okay? James Cameron perfected underwater. James Cameron, I guarantee he was watching this film and absolutely peeing himself laughing. Completely. I guarantee he is. Right. This doesn't look as good as Aquaman. It doesn't look as good as Wakanda Forever. It's like I say, it's too dark to be fun, and it's too fun to be and it's too silly to be real, if you know what I mean. It's kind of that way. And then you get to the third act when they do the whole kaiju climax, which, if you remember that, there is the sort of bit with massive Ursula towards the end, and you can't see it. And I watched this on an IMAX, laser projected on an IMAX screen, which, 90% of its audience aren't going to do, and I couldn't make out what was going on. It's just grayed out. It's grayed out, blurred thing. And I'm sat there thinking, we saw more of Godzilla in 2014 than I am seeing right now in this movie. I guarantee you. And then you get to all the bits that they've tweaked and changed. I mean, one of them does involve how Ursula is finally taken out, for instance. And you're forced to finally ask some serious logic questions. Right. And then I'm going to add my ultimate pièce de résistance to this absolute cluster F, which is... right. We have 11 Fast and Furious movies in existence, which proves conclusively, once and for all, and it's the argument I'm going to use forever, that audiences will accept anything if they're having enough fun. Okay? They shot a car into space, we swallowed it because we were having fun. Disney don't agree with that. Disney need everything to make sense, or they seem to. And much like Beauty and the Beast, they have tacked on this ridiculous memory spell element to this version of the story that was not there in the animated version. I have a younger sister. Trust me, I have seen The Little Mermaid more times than I've had hot dinners. I can quote The Little Mermaid, and I know that because I could quote along to most of this version of The Little Mermaid, because most of the dialogue hasn't really changed, save for, all of the Eric stuff and a weirdly tacked on bit about how Ursula and Triton are now siblings. They're now actually siblings who've had a rivalry. He kicked her out, and that's why, because in the animated version, it's sort of implied that she's a spurned lover. But now there's this weird memory spell thing, same as there was in Beauty and the Beast. And that's there to paper over all the logic holes. And you start thinking, dude, in the next screen, in this multiplex, is a franchise that shot a car into space. Get with the program. That being said, this is also the same movie that at one point forgets that birds can't breathe underwater and has a seagull literally fly underwater and have a 5-minute conversation and eat during. Also, then, therefore, inadvertently asking the question that we also asked in Beauty and the Beast, which is, okay, if you're okay smashing some cutlery, how do you know which ones are alive and which ones are dead? You know, like, weird kind of question that you ask. You know, like in this question, like, why is it okay to eat certain fish but certain ones are friends? Again, it's a strange thing. They kind of want to have their cake and eat it. They want everything to make sense, but then they chuck on enough of these weird little elements that don't. In a movie that you can barely see, that feels quite patronizing, that the kids are going to maybe find a bit too dark, and the parents are going to find frankly insulting. Like, because presumably they've grown up loving the original because they were human beings in 1989. And therefore what you wind up with is a film that barely scrapes by 3 stars and doesn't really seem to be for anyone, but does make a pretty great calling card for Halle Bailey. So, yeah, make of that what you will.
You can go and make your own mind up, as you said. It's in cinemas from today, The Little Mermaid. Right, we're on to our final movie in a moment, and I cannot wait to talk about this. Sisu. We'll let you know what we thought in just a second. Stay there. Hello and welcome back to the show. We have one more movie to look at, and I'm pleased to say this week I managed to get a screening on this, thanks to Van. It's called Sisu. I'm going to let you explain it because you can probably do it better than I could anyway. But yeah, I'll give you my 2 penneth in a moment.
So, new movie from writer-director Hjalmari Helander, who directed Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale, which is a fantastic Norwegian Christmas horror movie from many years ago, and a movie I'm very fond of called Big Game, which, if you don't remember, is where Samuel L. Jackson is the president and he gets shot, Air Force One gets shot down in the woods, and a young boy who's doing a hunting rite of passage thing has to protect him. Yeah, okay. That young boy, and I'm going to tell you this for reasons, was played by, I think his name was Oni Talmari, I think his name was. Hang on, it's written down here. Oh, Oni Tamiya would play that boy in that movie. Now, the same writer-director of that movie is back. And he's directed this movie. It's called Sisu. And we are told at the beginning of this movie, hang on, I took a picture of it when we watched the screening link. I actually took a picture of what Sisu literally translated as. And Sisu is a Finnish word that cannot be translated. It means a white-knuckled form of courage, an unimaginable determination. Now, that in and of itself is a pretty good description of what the plot of this movie is. I would like to sum it up as John Wick with Nazis. And this is set during the Lapland War, in which a gold collector, a Finnish gold prospector, is in Lapland. He wants nothing to do with the war. He has turned his back on the war. He's lost enough. He finds a hot spot of gold that he manages to, he mines with a pickaxe. Just he and his dog in the wilderness with a pickaxe, chucks it all in his sack and sets off back home to trade it in for his cash. Only to have, because obviously at this point in the Lapland War, the idea was that the Finnish government had made an agreement with the Russians that they would drive the Nazis out of Lapland, and in exchange there would be an accord that the Russians would, there would be peace with the Russians. All they had to do was get rid. So the Germans were being driven out. However, most of them didn't want to go. And when one particular platoon happens upon our gold prospector, our seemingly insignificant gold prospector, they'd think, oh, wow, a helpless old man with a big sack full of gold. We'll have that. And, they don't quite know who they've picked on. So I'm not going to tell you who he is. I'm going to let the clip do that for you. Here's the German platoon discovering exactly who it is they're messing with.
He fought in the Winter War. He lost his home and his family to the Russians. He became a ruthless, vengeful soldier who took orders from no one. The Finns They gave up trying to discipline or control him. They just sent him out, alone, into the wilderness to hunt Russian patrols. He became a one-man death squad. The reports are unconfirmed, but it looks like he has over 300 Russian kills. The Russians, they gave him a name. They call him Koshai, the Immortal.
I'm going to ask you this question, Adam, because I watched this and then I text you straight away with the screening link. Do I know what I'm talking about or what, sir?
Absolutely incredible movie. I will say I was quite perplexed because I was watching this screening link through my PlayStation, at which halfway through the movie, it decided to do an update. 1 hour and 56 minutes. I had to wait 24 hours to see the second half of this, and it is probably one of the only movies for a long time that I have really wanted to watch the whole thing in one go. But I am glad I watched it.
What a movie, right? I mean, I've not enjoyed an action movie this absolutely relentless since, you know which one I'm going to invoke now, The Raid. So 9 years since, it's been 9 years? 9 years. Oh, no, 9 years since the sequel. So I think it's 11 years since The Raid, which, again, still the best action movie of the 21st century. This effortlessly walks onto my top 10 action movies ever. I think this is absolutely tremendous. It's broken down into chapters which do feel like PlayStation level missions of sorts, and oh my god, you feel everything in this movie. Talk about immersive, wonderfully captured, brilliantly shot performance from Joma Tamiya, who plays our immortal, as we're told. Koshai, I love Koshai, by the way, because Koshai, the immortal, absolutely takes its place alongside Baba Yaga, the boogeyman, which is what they call John Wick, as just, these are great names for cinematic badasses. And this is absolutely uncompromising for an action movie. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's absolutely fantastic. You've got a great villain in Axel Henny as well, who's the commander. I love Axel Henny anyway. I think most mainstream audiences would know Axel Henny probably from The Martian, of all things. I remember from Headhunters years ago. I think it was great in that movie Headhunters with, I'm just going to say Jamie Lannister because I barely remember his name anymore. Actually, I mentioned earlier that Oni Tomiya was in this movie. Oni Tomiya, who plays one of the German soldiers, plays one of the more prominent German soldiers, is actually the son of the lead that they are hunting here in reality, and he was the young boy in the director's big game. This is just absolutely fantastic. If you are an action movie fan, you owe it to yourself on a cellular level to see this movie. It's in English, as you can hear there. I think there's like 5 minutes of subtitles at the end. I've got to pass it over to you. I mean, what did you love? What did you not love about Sisu?
Oh, the effect, absolutely outstanding, to the point where you actually, I'm not going to give away too much because it's hard for me because I don't necessarily review movies I've seen before without giving away plots, so I've got to try hard here. But there was a moment...
Did you think that they had actually... Because I wondered if they'd actually just blown up sacks of meat at a point.
Yes, well, I mean, it looked real. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, there was that point where you said, at this point in the movie, you're going to jump off of your sofa. And that's exactly what I did. I think I bit down all my nails watching this movie. It's like... What I loved about it was there was never a moment where I picked my phone up. Now that, for me, speaks volumes. I was completely just watching the screen with intent, wanting to know what's going to happen next, and just brilliant. 10 out of 10 for me.
It's worth noting is that I didn't give you a spoiler. I just said 21 minutes in. You're
going to, that's all you said. Yeah,
but
I mean, so good.
How did you find? Because I thought the villain of this was just terrific. I loved Axel Henny as the bad guy, and there's so many wonderful just sequences. There was a sequence with a boat, for instance, that is just on next level. There's a sequence with a petrol station. That oh wow. I mean, there's a certain fire that we see that you're just like, you should have done that. This is going to get really bad now. Oh no, yeah. There's a lot of that.
It's just literally got everything you possibly want if you're an action movie fan. And actually, without, again, giving away too much, this movie proved to me that it's not always what actors say. Sometimes it's what they don't say that can make a movie.
Well, yes, because you've got a more or less mute hero, haven't you? In
Yeah.
this? He has like 2 lines of dialogue at the end of the movie. Like I'm convinced that those are his only lines of dialogue.
Yeah, I think they were. Maybe there might have been one line at the start somewhere, but apart from that, he is completely silent. And you're almost your internal monologue watching this movie is almost filling in the gaps of what you think he's thinking, and I think that's really clever.
Absolutely. I say if you love the white knuckle relentlessness of the Raid or the John Wick series, oh my God, you've got to see Sisu. It's on release from today. Please, please, please go and see this. Give this your box office money. It has earned it. It deserves it. It's far and away one of if this doesn't make the 10 best movies of this year, I will be shocked because it's already in my top 10 action movies of all time, as I say.
I would definitely rate that one. So in cinemas from today. Right, next week, what have we got coming up? Reality is one of the movies that you're going to see.
Yeah, Reality, new thriller starring Sydney Sweeney. I believe you get to watch that one as well. We've got the new Curzon movie, Amanda, next week. There's a documentary, Mad About the Boy, the Noel Coward story, to come next week, which I'm looking forward to. I mean, I don't know an awful lot about Noel Coward himself. I know his works, but I don't know much about the man himself, despite certain things that he did in World War II, which is one of my favourite ever wartime stories. I think I've told you before about Roald Dahl and what he got up to in World War II with Ian Fleming. Noel Coward was part of that secret unit, so I'm intrigued to see if that comes up.
That would be interesting if it did, yeah.
Yes, if it does, I'm going to be fascinated. All I'm going to say is look up The Irregulars, because it's how it's not a movie, I don't know. We've got a new Stephen King adaptation next week, The Boogeyman, starring Chris Messina, based on, this is a true story, my favourite work of Stephen King's. It's a short story that Stephen King wrote in one of his collections, and I think it's the best thing Stephen King ever wrote, The Boogeyman. Not quite the same story. They have changed it slightly, and I know that from the plot synopsis rather than having seen it. I'm seeing it Tuesday evening. Can't wait. But you know what I can't wait for more than anything?
Oh, yes.
Oh, God. I mean, talk about... There's highly anticipated movies, and then there's this. The sequel to 2018's Best Animated Feature winner at the Academy Awards. It's the sequel to Into the Spider-Verse. It's Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It is finally here. Apparently, it's amazing, and it's game-changing, and we're all going to be blown away. But we're going to find out for ourselves next week.
Looking forward to that. Well, that is all we have time for this week. We will, of course, be back next week. Until then, I've been Adam Ball.
I've been Van Connor, and we shall return.